retiring undefeated from boxing it's a relatively new concept in a lot of ways. Like, okay, Rocky Marciano did it, Joe Calzaghe did it, Ricardo Lopez. In fact, I was watching a video on Rocky Marciano the other month, and the fact he was undefeated back in the 50s was kind of like a mark against his resume at the time. I remember this old dude coming out, yeah, we didn't see Rocky lose, we didn't know what he was like under adversity. So they kind of held it against him in some circles, the fact he didn't lose. It wasn't, oh, you're so great, you're undefeated. They want you to see how you come back from that. And I don't know if there's some carryover from that attitude in the 50s till today, because, you know, obviously people always question Joe Calzaghe's resume, and they always question Floyd's resume. But Floyd's still active, and we don't know how his career is going to pan out or conclude yet. At the moment, he looks like he can't be beaten, but who knows? Sugar Ray Robinson went about 90-odd bouts unbeaten. They say Chavez went 80-plus bouts, but he didn't really. He did lose a fight in Mexico. I think, was it a technical decision loss or something like that? But they reversed it as a win for Chavez, you know, to maintain his record. You know, you can look that up. You know what I mean? Check the source you get it from, because you still might not believe it. And boxing is the art of self-defense. That's what it is. It's not. It wasn't really designed, really. Obviously, you want to win. Obviously, I don't know how I could put this. Yes, the object was always to win. But one of the other big points was to learn how to defend yourself. Make sure you can give a good account of yourself in a scrap. You know? That was one of the big drawing points to what made the sport what it was. That's why if you look at BoxRec and you look at a lot of the old fighters' records, you'll see no contest, no decision, because they wasn't really bothered a lot of times if you scrape by on points by a couple of rounds. They didn't really care, you know? They didn't really care. If you score a KO, then okay, it's conclusive, you know what I mean? But it is what it is, you know? It is what it is. I want to give an honorable mention to Everett Bigfoot Martin. He took guys like Larry Holmes, Vladimir Klitschko, George Foreman. Although it was in George Foreman and Larry Holmes' later years. He took all these guys the distance, and a few more people as well at heavyweight. He did take a lot of beatings. I mean, if you look at his record, right? There's so much red in comparison to green on the BoxRec. You call him Everett Bloodfoot Martin, you know? But no, them guys, he took a really good shot, and you had to defend himself in there, you know? To me, that's admirable. I think there's an admirable quality in that, you know? Like in the UK, we used to have a guy called Nobby Nobbs from Birmingham. And basically, as the BoxRec says here, Nobby's stable contains most of the prolific tomato cans in the UK and is referred to and by Nobbs himself as Losers Unlimited. Because basically, you know, he'll just have boxers there to fill in for short notice fights and fight contenders. Like, he's worked with Peter Buckley, who's lost so many fights, man. Go look up these names, man. Don't just expect me to bring everything to you. Go and box if you want to do it, you know. Howard Clark, Brian Coleman, and them guys, just guys who can defend themselves pretty well, you know. I mean, like, you know, pretty well. They don't look out of place in the ring, but they just don't have the ambition to be contenders. They'll just do enough to get their payday and not take too bad a beating. You know, that's their shit. That's their shit. But today we're going to focus on two middleweight stroke super middleweight fighters. They're going to be the main focus of the video. So let's go. Okay, so we're going to start with Sanderline Williams, a middleweight. And he finished at middleweight. I think he finished his career at middleweight, basically. He won his first 4 fights or so. Lost a unanimous decision to also ran, what's his name? Andre Cooper. Then he later lost the fight to someone named Dwight Walker. Lost his next fight to Lindell Holmes, and this was the first time he was stopped. Lindell Holmes is a former super middleweight champion of the world, and Lindell TKO'd him in 9 rounds. But after that, he was never to be stopped again for the rest of his career. He came to the UK, he lost on points to Errol Graham. Errol Graham is said to be one of the best fighters never to win a world title, you know. He's from the UK, he's from the Brendan Ingle stable. Won the British, Commonwealth and European, and he had a very complicated style. And he was a world-class, world championship contender back in the 80s, there's no doubt about that. And one of the more trickier fighters you'll see. So he went the distance with him. Wins a few fights here, wins quite a few here. Then he fights Iran Barkley. Iran Barkley, what can I say? Middleweight champion, knocked out Thomas Hearns, knocked out Darren Van Horn, all in 2 upsets. Did he win a light heavyweight crown as well? I'm not sure. 2-time world champion, one of the toughest MFs ever to step in the ring, period. People didn't like fighting Barkley. Horrible guy to fight, tough, hard puncher, and a better boxer than actually people give him credit for. He lost to Barkley by a split decision. That's no mean feat, you know, it's no mean feat. His next fight, Frank Tate. Frank Tate, Olympic gold medalist. Was it at welterweight? But anyway, Frank Tate eventually became a fully fledged middleweight, big middleweight, former IBF champion, and a good champion too, decent champion. He lost his title to Michael Nunn, but yet still, Sanderline was able to take Frank 10 rounds, unanimous decision, you know? What were the scores? 94, 97, 94, 97, 93, 97. Not bad, not bad at all. Not bad, not bad, not bad. He wins another fight, and then he loses a split decision to Ron Essett. I remember Ron Essett challenging Chris Eubanks for his WBO middleweight champion, or maybe the super middleweight championship back in the day. Probably the middleweight. And he was a good fighter. He was a world-class contender. He lost a split decision to him. In fact, I'm just reading the box rec. They had to fight an extra round after the fight ended in a draw. That's for the NABF title. This fight went 13 rounds. It was scheduled for 12, but they fought an extra round because it was deadlocked at 12. He fought Donnelly, lost on points to Donnelly. Now, you see, these names ain't going to mean much to you until I put you in the frame. Donnelly, you know, 6'1". If you go and, I'm not going to go into the box rec everywhere because it's just going to take too much time. But his record is just littered with KO wins and KO wins, you know. They brought him over to the UK back in the 80s just for a warm-up bout for Tony Simpson. And, man, he flipped the script on the place, man. He decked Simpson about twice in about 4 or 6 rounds, and he knocked him out. Dangerous Don Lee, they used to call him. And Sanderline lost a unanimous decision to him. He lost to Murky Sosa, tough middleweight contender back in the day. I think he fought Roy Jones, and I think he did anyway. Very tough contender back in the day. Unanimous decision lost to him. He went the distance with Nigel Benn, lost a split decision to Nigel Benn. I think, was this after Ben lost to Eubanks or Ben lost to Watson? I can't remember. And that's no mean feat. And I remember that fight. He actually hurt Ben briefly in the middle rounds. He hurt Ben and lost a split decision. That was in New Jersey. He lost a unanimous decision to Reggie Johnson. Reggie, former WBA world middleweight champion. He beat Steve Collins on a majority decision, defended it a good few times as well. A lot of times. He was a good fighter. Reggie was a good fighter. He fought Roy Jones. He went the distance with Roy Jones. I remember that. He actually, no, he didn't floor Roy Jones. He floored James Toney, though. He fought James Toney and went the distance with Toney. These are good fighters, you know. These are good fighters. These are good fighters. You know, Reggie Johnson was a good fighter, former world champion. He floored James Toney. Let's keep going. Sanderline Williams fought James Toney to a majority draw. Oh, hell yeah. Hell yeah. Check that out. I forgot about that one. And look at this one. Look at this one. Gerald McClellan. Gerald the G-Man McClellan. Now, Sanderline went down in round 2, but he went the 8-round distance. He went the 8-round distance with the G-Man McClellan. You don't know who he is? I'm not going to tell you. Go and do some research. It'll be good for you. This guy's no joke, man. Look, Sanderline winners weren't no joke. You know? Only one more fighter apparently went the distance with the G-Man. Only one more fighter. Somebody named Charles Hollis. You know? Go do the research, man. Don't just listen to the video. Go do the research. You have BoxRec like I have BoxRec. Go do the research. You know? So after the Gerald McClellan fight, he goes back in with James Toney again. This time he loses a unanimous decision. 10 rounds. Over 10. Like he loses to Lonnie Beasley, who was a fringe contender back in the day. And his last fight, he lost to Joe Lipsy, who challenged Bernard Hopkins for the title. Lipsy was a good fighter, big knockout streak. I remember Bernard schooling him badly and basically wrecked Joe Lipsy's career. But you know, that's Sanderline Williams. That's a journeyman. This is a journeyman. Don't tell me that ain't impressive. That's impressive. Yes, he didn't win a lot of them. I mean, let's look at the overall ledger. 124, 14 KOs, lost 15, and was stopped or KO'd only the once and drew 1 fight. Journeyman. But a good one. A good one. So, trust me, there's champions who couldn't do what he did. There's lots of paper champions who, if they had fought the competition he fought, their career would have broke down and just been in tatters. They wouldn't have been able to go the distance with Tony, McClellan, Reggie Johnson, Nigel Benn, Harold Graham, Don Lee. Come on, man. Iran Barkley. That is fighting hard competition. Hard competition. And you need to know what you're doing. If you're going to fight that level of competition, whether you're winning or not, for you to come out with all your marbles, take them the distance, and pose them problems, and be lucid and not have some severe kind of brain disorder, you have to know what the fuck you're doing. Trust me on that. Trust me on that. Then we go to Randy Smith. Okay, he won his first 4. Lost to someone named Vernon Reed over 6. Had a big, long winning streak, actually. No names I recognize, really. Then he lost to Mark Kaler, who's from the UK. Kaler, European, Commonwealth and British champion. You know, he won all them titles back in the day. He was one of the UK's favourite fighters back then, you know, in the Terry Lawler stable. Not bad, that's not bad. Travelling away from home, losing to a European, British, Commonwealth champion. Lost, he looked alright, not a great result. But he stayed on his feet, Went back, lost on points to someone named Horacio Perez. Went back, won another fight, lost 2 fights. And then he loses a unanimous decision to Iran Barkley. Same with Frank Tate, the same with Michael Olajide. He was a contender. He was an undefeated contender when he fought him, you know. He did fight for a championship. He used to model himself on Michael Jackson, Michael Olajide. You know, I think he used to do the moonwalk and all that when he came in the ring, and he had the perm and everything. And he went the distance with him. Let's not forget Frank Tate, former Olympic gold medalist and IBF middleweight champion. Let's not forget that. Michael Nunn, who was one of the pound-for-pound best fighters when he was doing his thing back in the day, and a former world champion. Went the distance with Michael Nunn. Joaquin Velasquez was a contender back in the day. He might have held a belt or something, I can't remember. Went the distance with James Kinchin, tough middleweight contender back in the day. Floored Tommy Hearns, nearly knocked him out. Kinchin never won any titles, but you know, he was a world-class contender at middleweight and super middleweight. He floored Hearns, but lost on points. when they were fighting for the WBO super middleweight title. And Kinchin, obviously, I keep saying, he was the first fighter I can remember who came up positive on steroids, you know. That's the first case I can remember. And after James Kinchin, he lost to, you know, Mike Cedillo, fringe contender, Donnelly, who I mentioned before, and Guy Waters. Like, not great fighters. Guy Waters was from Australia. Tough guy. He was a contender. He lost to Tony Wilson from the UK. Tony Wilson, British champion or whatever. I mean, maybe Commonwealth. Then he lost on points to Mike McCallum, all-time great, unanimous decision. And going back to the Tony Wilson fight, he only lost that by half a point. And considering that it was in the UK, we can safely assume that Smith probably won the fight. I'm going to tell you a funny story about Tony Wilson after. Lost to Victor Cordoba, very tough fighter, super middleweight champion back in the day, as far as I remember. Cordoba beat Michael Nunn, and he was good. Victor was good. Where did he come from again? He was South American. I can't remember which part of South America. Was he? Wasn't Colombian? Was he? Can't remember. I know he used to fight from out of Ireland. I remember that. Okay, back to Sanderline Williams. Lost on points. Then one win later after that. Lost a 10-round decision to Chris Eubanks, you know, in the UK at the York Hall. It's kind of bugging me why I can't remember nothing about this fight. I'm not sure if I actually saw it. Might not have been televised. Back to Victor Cordoba. You see, I have to get all these bits out of my head, man. He was Panamanian, you know. I know it sounds like useless information to you, but I have to get it out. I have to get them out. Lost to Art Jimison, Nelson Alves, or whatever, on points. Then he fought Lindsay Morgan, and interestingly enough, I forgot about Lindsay. I was going to put him in there. I might just go over his resume quick and his story, because he's another journeyman. And he lost a unanimous decision to Lindsay Morgan. He draws for the Illinois State Super Middleweight title, doesn't really mean much. He lost a 10-rounder to John Scully, former contender at light heavyweight. Couple more wins here and there. Loses a unanimous decision over 10 with Bernard Hopkins. A few more fights here and there, losing and winning. Loses to Frank Grant in the UK. I remember Frank Grant. He beat Errol Graham near the end of his career. All on points as per usual. Paul Vadden. He lost to Paul Vadden. Vadden was a very good fighter. He fought Terry Norris back in the day. He was a light middleweight champion. I don't know what stage that Randy Smith fought him here. Lost to Kenneth Wack, who gave a friend of mine, Mark Prince, a contender, a really hard fight. Funnily enough, he won his last 3 bouts and then retired. Go figure. Now, Lindsay Morgan, yeah? Lindsay Morgan. He got stopped quite a lot, but he finished his career at heavyweight. He started at middleweight, to be honest with you. But, okay, let's just run through the names. I don't need to know everything here. He went the distance from Anthony Hembrecht, former Olympian, Antoine Bird, who challenged, did he challenge Roy Jones? Antoine Bird, I think he did. He beat Randy Smith, actually, on points. Lost to Andrew Maynard, fringe contender back in the day, light heavyweight. Went the distance with Lamar Parks, who was a very hard puncher. He lost his career. I don't know if he's still alive, Lamar Parks. He actually contracted AIDS from his woman. His woman caught AIDS and then he got it. That's a sad story, Lamar Parks. He was a good fighter. Lamar Kid Parks. Hard puncher, good fighter. Morgan, he lost to Christoph Tiozo, who was definitely a super middleweight or middleweight champion back in, I think, super middleweight on points. He lost to Nigel Benn on points. I remember that fight. He gave Benn a good fight. He drew another fight in France. He used to fight away from home a lot. You see, a lot of these fights are in Australia, in France. They're in all types of different locations around the world, a lot of these fights. And, you know, he went the distance with Henry Mask, who was a long-term champion. He went the 10-round distance with him. Henry Mask was a good light heavyweight champion. Murky Souza, Tim Littles. He lost on points to Tim Littles for the USBA super middleweight title. Tim Littles used to be a super middleweight champion. I can't remember what belt. Did he beat Michael Nerner? I can't remember. Can't remember. Eric Nicoletta, European champion or whatever, as far as I remember. Tony Thornton, another tough fighter. He went the distance with him. Came to the UK, lost on points to Crawford Ashley, who was a good fighter. European champion he was, I think British champion, that kind of level. Lost on points to him. Pretty tight, 2.5 points in it or whatever. And yeah, he lost to Mark Prince, longtime friend of mine from around the way, world title challenger, knockout puncher. He lost on points to Mark Prince. What I remember mostly about Lindsay Morgan was he was very tall. He was about 6'3", and he had a bad burn on one side of his body. Durable. Like, yeah, he got knocked out by Ole Clementson in '96, and that was at light heavyweight. Moved up to cruiserweight. Lost a whole load of fights on points. Got KO'd by Kevin McBride. TKO'd by Bruce Seldon. TKO'd by Alessia Castillo at heavyweight and all that good stuff. And, you know, a lot of losses. But at the same time, a good journeyman. Who, if you had a prospect at middleweight, super middleweight, light heavyweight or whatever, it would be a great learning fight for them. It always would be. And the story about Lindsay Morgan was, I think he actually went into the housing estate business because he was making not great but decent purses. Because you see the names he's fighting, he's making decent purses. And I heard he caked off quite nice. And, you know, he made a nice transition either while he was fighting or when he retired. And he flipped his money over into the housing estate market. You know what I mean? That's a journeyman. Excellent shit, you know. So, I'm going to wrap this one up soon. Tony Wilson. Never in your life will you hear a story like this. Never in your life will you hear a story like this. Now, Tony Wilson, you know what I mean, British champion. He didn't win the European Championship, like I was saying. I think I was getting caught up in the moment trying to advertise these guys' records and be better than what they were. No, it wasn't really. But he didn't win the European title. He was a British champion. And after he lost his title to Tom Collins in 2, I remember that fight as well. That was in 1989. He fought Steve McCarthy in Southampton. I think that might have been in Steve McCarthy's hometown. And Steve McCarthy was giving Wilson a beating. And in the 3rd round, Tony Wilson's mum, as you're going to see in the description box, yeah, she comes in with a shoe. She had a shoe in her hand. She comes in the ring, charges across there, and hits him in the back of his head. And hits McCarthy in the back of his head to prevent him administrating any more punishment on her son. Oh my gosh. And the thing is, yeah, it was weird because McCarthy was celebrating like he won, like the referee stopped it or something. And I think everyone assumed that the victory would go to McCarthy, you know. But no, it's registered as a TKO win for Wilson. Because he stopped fighting, I suppose. But his mum came in the ring. The man's mum came in the ring. Unbelievable, man. I'll never forget that. Man. That was just a mad story. Man. So, just to get the gist of what I was saying in the video the other day, there is a lot to extract from a lot of aspects that boxing has to offer. And it's not always world championship. It's not always about champions. contenders. It's not always about that. There's always stuff that you can learn. And these journeymen, you know, the Randy Smiths, the Sanderline Williams, the Lindsay Morgans, where would the game be without them guys, man? Where would it be? Where would it be? They are part of the lifeblood of boxing, man. And every country has them. Maybe not to the level that these three reach, but every country has journeymen. Every country. Or has had them. And you know, it was time to shed some light on that. I don't know if you guys have got any, well, I don't know, why am I even asking that? You guys will always add some good shit to the video, I mean, so I always appreciate that. And with that, I'm going to say peace. I'm going to say peace.